Biggie's son is going after his father's former manager over control of his family's massive estate. But the way Wayne Barrow allegedly ended up in control is where things get really suspicious. And somehow it all happened in just 15 days. Let me break it down. CJ Wallace didn't post a video. He didn't drop a statement on Instagram. He filed paperwork. Christopher Wallace Jr. claims his grandmother's will was drastically changed weeks before her death. And he thinks something doesn't seem right about it, so he's bringing the matter to court. Here's the timeline he's laid out. Christopher filed court docs saying his grandmother, Valletta Wallace, died in February 2025 and was survived by him and her granddaughter. Her son, the late rapper Notorious B.I.G., was killed back in 1997. That's the backbone of this entire fight. A mother who outlived her son by nearly 3 decades and who spent those decades as the gatekeeper of everything he left behind. According to CJ's filing, his grandma executed a will in 2020, which divided up her fur collection, jewelry, music awards given to Biggie, a Mercedes-Benz SUV, a property in Jamaica, and various other property, with most of the items bequeathed to Christopher and his sister, and a few items given to her brother. That will also spelled out something bigger than jewelry and cars. The 2020 will said her interest in the company managing Biggie's estate would go to her foundation. Then came the part that triggered this entire legal battle. Christopher said 15 days before his grandmother died, Valletta signed an amendment to her will that cut out her grandchildren and appointed a man named Wayne Barrow, a former manager of Biggie, as the executor of the estate. Wayne Barrow isn't a stranger to this family. He worked alongside Biggie during his career, and in the years after, he stayed close to Valletta's inner circle. By the time she passed, he held serious sway, not just informally, but on paper. CJ Wallace alleges that his grandmother signed an amendment 15 days before her death that essentially cut the grandchildren out of her will and made Wayne Barrow the vice chairman of the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, the executor of his father's estate. Now, why does an executor role matter this much? Because whoever holds it controls the money, controls the decisions, and controls what happens to everything Valletta owned, including her stake in the company that manages her son's name, image, music, and legacy. CJ isn't just saying he got left out of a will. He's saying the entire chain of command over his father's estate got rewritten in the final 2 weeks of his grandmother's life. And he's not alone in raising an eyebrow. His filing pulls in his sister, Tiana, and their uncle, Valletta's brother, as people who were also supposed to inherit under the 2020 will. Wallace claims he, his sister, Tiana, and her brother were originally meant to inherit some of their grandmother's priceless possessions, including jewelry, her fur collection, music awards given to Biggie, a Mercedes-Benz SUV, and a property in Jamaica when she created her will in 2020. So here's where the story stands at the moment the lawsuit landed. A will that protected the grandchildren for 5 years, then got flipped in a 2-week window right before death, handing control to a former manager instead. That's the headline, but the why behind it, and what CJ says was actually happening to his grandmother in those final 15 days, is where this gets uncomfortable. CJ's court filing doesn't stop at the will changed. It goes into detail about the state Valletta was in when she supposedly signed it. And that detail is the entire foundation of his legal challenge. Because in estate law, a will only stands if the person signing it was in a fit state to understand what they were doing. If CJ can show his grandmother wasn't, the whole amendment could get thrown out. That's exactly what he's asking a judge to do. To understand why CJ thinks the signature on that amendment shouldn't count, you have to understand what he says his grandmother's life looked like in her last 2 weeks. In his filing, CJ raised concerns about his grandmother's condition at the time the amendment was executed, claiming Valletta's health had significantly declined, that she was taking numerous medications and was frequently confined to bed. This isn't a passing mention in his filing, it's the core of his argument. A woman who is bedridden, medicated, and in the final stretch of her life is, in his telling, not someone who should be signing away control of a 9-figure estate to someone outside her direct bloodline. But CJ goes further than just describing her condition. He's also attacking the paperwork itself. He questioned the signatures on the document, arguing they appear facially inconsistent with Valletta's signatures and should be examined by an expert. That phrase, facially inconsistent, shows up across every outlet covering this story, and it's doing a lot of work. It's a legal way of saying these don't look like they came from the same hand. CJ isn't just alleging his grandmother was pressured or confused. He's putting on the table the possibility that the signature itself doesn't belong to her. Put those two claims together, declining health plus questionable signatures, and you get the entire basis for what CJ is asking the court to do. CJ is asking the court to invalidate the amendment and immediately remove Barrow as executor. Not just pause it, not just review it, invalidate it completely, and pull Barrow out of the position altogether. Think about what that would mean if a judge agrees. It would roll the estate back to the 2020 version of the will, the one where the grandchildren inherit the personal property, and Valletta's business interest goes to the foundation rather than to an individual man. It would strip Barrow of the title that currently gives him legal standing over Valletta's slice of Biggie's business empire. Everything Barrow has built control over in the past year and a half would be back up for grabs. And this is where the story stops being about jewelry and a Mercedes and starts being about something worth a lot more. Because the 2020 will said her interest in the company managing Biggie's estate would go to her foundation. And when Biggie died, Valletta had acquired a 50% interest in Biggie's company, which she managed with her son's widow, Faith Evans, until Valletta passed away. That 50% interest is not a small line item. It's half of everything tied to the commercial afterlife of one of the most influential rappers in history. His music, his catalog, his name and likeness, all of it. So when CJ Wallace stands up in court and says his grandmother's final wishes were altered while she lay in bed on medication, he's not fighting over sentimental keepsakes. He's fighting over who controls half of a business empire built on his father's legacy. And the man on the other side of that fight already has a track record of winning battles over exactly that kind of money, which is the next piece of this puzzle. Before CJ ever filed a single page against him, Wayne Barrow was already deep in a separate legal war over the same pot of money, and he was winning. Here's the setup. After Valletta died, her half of the business that controls Biggie's catalog didn't just sit still. Evans, along with Miss Wallace, owned Notorious B.I.G. LLC, which controlled the rapper's music catalog and images, before entering into a joint venture deal with Primary Wave in March 2025, a month after Miss Wallace's death. The deal, which the Wall Street Journal reported was worth $100 million, gave Primary Wave a stake in Biggie's catalog, as well as certain name, image, and likeness rights. Once that money started flowing, the question became, who gets Valletta's cut? And that's where Barrow made his move. CJ Wallace files suit against Barrow in Pennsylvania, alleging manipulation in control of Valletta Wallace's estate, while a Delaware court handed the former manager of the Notorious B.I.G. a decisive win last week in a legal battle over the control of a 9-figure catalog deal built on the late rapper's legacy. The ruling itself didn't hold back on how messy this whole arrangement had become. The judge said Evans' legal position fails at many levels, and observed that the lawsuit was perhaps the inevitable result of Valletta and Evans' decision to become 50-50 partners in Biggie's music catalog after the rapper was killed in 1997, quoting Biggie's own lyric about keeping family and business separate, then noting that after his death, his mother and widow did exactly the opposite. That line landed hard across the hip-hop world, a judge quoting Biggie's own words, back at the two women who spent decades managing what he left behind, pointing out that they'd ignored his advice completely. So what actually happened in that ruling? Valletta had named Barrow, who managed Biggie, as both the sole executor of her estate and the trustee who should control her interest in the business entity known as Notorious B.I.G. LLC. Barrow sued Evans for seizing the catalog in July 2025, alleging she had distributed Primary Wave proceeds to Tiana and CJ while withholding the trust's share, and the music executive sought the withheld funds and to replace Evans as company manager. Evans didn't just roll over. Evans filed a counterclaim arguing that Barrow did not have a formal position with Notorious B.I.G. LLC, and that his attempt to take control of the company violated the LLC's operating agreement. The judge wasn't convinced. The judge dismissed Evans' counterclaim. The number that came out of that ruling puts real weight on why this fight matters so much. On August 7, Delaware Chancellor Kathleen McCormick ruled that Wayne Barrow, executor of Valletta Wallace's estate and trustee of her trust, is entitled to Valletta's 25% share of profits from the Primary Wave catalog partnership, and that money will go to the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation. Barrow's lawyer wasted no time framing the win. Barrow's attorney, Jay Freiberg, called the outcome a complete vindication, saying Faith had no basis whatsoever to withhold the money and to lock Wayne out, and that the judge in Delaware realized that and wrote a decision granting them full rights. Now step back and look at the order of events. Barrow wins a Delaware court battle, securing a quarter of the Primary Wave payout. Days later, C.J. Wallace's Pennsylvania filing goes public, aiming to strip Barrow of the very titles, executor, trustee, that just earned him that win. The move comes after Wayne scored a victory in a legal battle with Faith, when a judge ruled Faith had to give Wayne access to Valletta's portion of the Biggie Trust profits. And it appears Christopher is trying to throw a wrench in this by challenging the amendment to Valletta's will that purportedly gives Wayne authority to control her estate. This is not a coincidence of timing that anyone in this family is likely to miss. Barrow just proved in one courtroom that his titles come with real financial teeth. CJ is now trying to prove in a different courtroom that Barrow never should have held those titles in the first place. And there's a detail buried inside the Delaware ruling that adds fuel to CJ's argument before he even walked into his own courtroom. According to the ruling, Evans was apparently upset at Miss Wallace over her decision to remove her grandson, CJ Wallace, as a co-trustee, and the reasons for that change were not explained. A judge in a completely separate case had already flagged that CJ used to have a formal role in managing his grandmother's trust, and that he'd been quietly removed from it with no explanation on record. That's not something CJ made up. That's something a Delaware court noticed on its own. So now you've got two parallel fights running at the same time, both circling the same pool of money, both involving the same man. And Faith Evans, Biggie's widow, the mother of two of his children, is caught in the middle of both. To really get why this is such a tangled fight, you need to understand who actually held power over Biggie's business before any of this litigation started and how that power got split up. Miss Wallace and Evans, under their company holdings, transferred half of their rights to BIG's children, Tiana Wallace and Christopher Jordan, CJ Wallace. That means structurally 4 people had a stake in the company controlling Biggie's business: Valletta, Faith, Tiana, and CJ. Under the company's operating agreement, Valletta and Evans each transferred half of their distribution rights to Biggie's children, Tiana Wallace and CJ, leaving Valletta, Evans, Tiana, and CJ each entitled to 25% of company payouts. That structure worked fine while Valletta was alive. She and Faith ran things together, and the kids got their cut. But the moment Valletta died, her 25% slice needed somewhere to go. And that's exactly the slice everyone is now fighting over. Because whoever controls that 25% doesn't just get money, they get a seat at the table where decisions about Biggie's name, his music, his likeness get made. Faith's position after Valletta's death shifted too. According to the court filing, Evans became the sole manager of Biggie LLC after Valletta's death. That's a big deal. It put Faith in charge of the operations. But being in charge of operations and being entitled to Valletta's specific 25% share are two different things. And that's the exact seam Barrow's lawsuit ripped open. This allegedly makes her responsible for giving the deceased matriarch's trust, managed by Barrow, its cut of the profits from the catalog sale. And Barrow wrote that Evans' distributed sale proceeds to Tiana, CJ, and presumably to herself, but wrongfully withheld the trust share of the proceeds. So Faith paid out the kids, she paid herself, and according to Barrow, she just didn't pay the trust, the one now controlled by the man CJ is trying to remove. Here's where the foundation comes back into the picture, because it's central to what CJ says was supposed to happen with that money. Remember? The 2020 will said her interest in the company managing Biggie's estate would go to her foundation. That's the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, named after Biggie himself, set up to carry on charitable work in his name. Under the original will, Valletta's share of the business wasn't supposed to enrich any one person. It was supposed to flow into that foundation. And on paper, that's still technically where the money is headed, even under Barrow's control. The Delaware court ruled that Barrow, as executor and trustee, is entitled to Valletta's 25% share of profits from the Primary Wave Catalog Partnership, and that money in turn will go to the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation. Barrow gets Miss Wallace's 25% share as trustee of her trust, and any interest the trust earned will be given to the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, where Barrow is a board member. Now sit with that for a second. Barrow isn't just executor of the estate and trustee of the trust. He's also a board member of the foundation the money is supposed to land in. That's 3 different hats, all controlled by one man, all sitting on top of the same pot of cash. CJ's lawsuit isn't disputing that the foundation should get money. The 2020 will he wants restored says the same thing. What he's disputing is whether Barrow should be the one holding every single lever that decides how, when, and under what terms that money actually moves. Barrow, for his part, has pushed back on the idea that any of this is about personal gain. When the original primary wave deal closed, before any of this litigation even existed, he was already framing his involvement as being about protecting Valletta's wishes, rather than chasing a payday. "We're not here to chase checks," Barrow said at the time, adding that Valletta trusted no one. That trusted no one line has taken on new weight now that CJ's lawsuit is public. Barrow's own words paint Valletta as a woman who kept her circle tight and made decisions on her own terms. CJ's lawsuit paints the same woman in her final 2 weeks as someone confined to bed on heavy medication, whose signature might not even be verifiably hers on the one document that handed Barrow the keys to everything. Those two versions of Valletta Wallace can't both be fully true. And that contradiction, a woman either sharp enough to trust no one or too weakened to know what she was signing, sits right at the center of what a judge in Pennsylvania now has to sort out. So where does this actually leave everyone? CJ, Barrow, Faith, the foundation, and the estate itself? Right now, nothing has been decided. CJ's filing is a request, not a ruling. Christopher is asking the judge to find the amendment invalid and immediately remove Wayne Barrow as the executor of the estate. That process takes time. Courts typically call in handwriting experts to examine contested signatures, review medical records from the final weeks of a person's life, and hear testimony from anyone present when a document was signed. None of that happens overnight, and none of it has happened yet in this case. But the fact that this filing landed right in Pennsylvania, right after Barrow's win in Delaware, tells you the family isn't waiting around. CJ Wallace has launched a lawsuit of his own in nearby Pennsylvania that challenges Barrow's role as the trustee and executor of his grandmother's estate and holdings, and the case is still pending. That word pending is doing a lot of work right now. It means the outcome genuinely isn't decided. It means Barrow could keep every title he currently holds, or he could lose all of them, depending on what a judge decides about those 15 days in February and the medications, the bedridden state, and the question signature. If CJ wins, the ripple effects go well beyond who's holding the executor title. It would call into question the very foundation of Barrow's win against Faith Evans in Delaware, because that ruling leaned entirely on Barrow's standing as executor and trustee. Pull that standing out from under him, and suddenly the primary wave payout distribution could be back up for renegotiation too. 2 separate courtrooms, 2 separate states, and 1 single piece of paper signed 15 days before a woman's death sitting at the center of both. If Barrow keeps his role, the current setup holds. He continues as executor of Valletta's estate, trustee of her trust, and a board member of the foundation her share of the business money flows into. Faith Evans continues managing Biggie LLC day to day, but with Barrow controlling the 25% slice that used to belong to Valletta. And CJ, the son who filed this lawsuit, would be left with a decision: appeal or step back entirely from a fight over an estate that no longer legally recognizes him. What's clear either way is that this family has been fighting over the business side of Biggie's legacy in one form or another since the year he died. The 2020 will was supposed to be the document that settled things: clear division of jewelry, awards, property, and business interests, all mapped out while Valletta was in good health and thinking clearly. The amendment, signed 15 days before her death, undid almost all of it in one signature. Whether that signature holds up under a judge's scrutiny is now the only question that matters. For now, CJ Wallace has done what his father once rapped about avoiding. He's pulled family and business into the same courtroom because in his eyes, somebody already crossed that line first. And until a Pennsylvania judge rules on those 15 days, nobody legally owns the answer to who actually controls what's left of Christopher Wallace's fortune.